Okay, so now let us compare the Indian versus US forms of government primarily on the level of the president. Remember, we are, this all of these lectures are related to the president. So functioning at the head of the Indian Union, like that of the USA, is called the president, but that is where the similarities end. We have a parliamentary form of government. The US has a presidential form. Our president is akin to that of the British monarch, wherein you are just there to sign documents, whereas in the US the effective you can say power holder is the president of the United States of America. Right? He's only, as in our president, is only a formal but not an effective head of the executive. The effective repository of power is the Council of Ministers. Note everything down in this manner only, it will form good language for your answers. In US, the president is the head of the state and the effective head of the executive. All right. So write that down as well. Let's move on to the next page. In the US, basically, the president alone is vested with the power to appoint executive officers and remove. So he has significant control over government departments. Remember, as in we have already discussed in our lectures, that president pretty much has no power to do pretty much anything. He can't even appoint ministers. The only time that he uses some discretion is basically when a coalition government is about to be formed. So he uses some discretion to invite somebody to form the government, that is the prime minister there. But usually even that power isn't with him. But in the United States of America, all the executive officers, the president has full power to appoint them and remove them. So what does that do is basically all of us ministers, so ministers, they are secretaries of state. The president can appoint them. So you can appoint even experts. Our limitation is that you have to, the minister has to be a member of the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. Basically, you have to be, that ministership has to be intertwined with the legislative. So the executive is almost always connected with the legislative, but herein it's a completely separate ball game altogether. So he has complete political responsibility, the US president, for all executive action under him. There are secretary of states which he appoints. It's not bound to follow their advice as well. This is what basically Donald Trump's presidentship, the main drama was going on, that he was only doing things as per his own record and basically that is why his ship began to sink, and he has full political responsibility as well. Now contrast this with whenever you're writing this answer, contrast this with the Indian president and his titular role, that is he has status but no power. We have already discussed this. So combine both the aspects and just contrast them out. ठीक है जी? Presidential form of government is based on doctrine of separation of powers. Write this down. So the legislative is completely separate from the executive, is completely separate from the judiciary. All right. So in the legislative, there is US Congress. The executive is completely under the domain of the president. The judiciary, well, there are courts, and there are courts at the federal level, basically at the state level, and basically at the central or the national level in the USA. So they don't have this integrated judiciary as such. And this doctrine of separation of powers is usually credited to a jurist called Montesquieu. So write this down, Montesquieu. If you have a LLB, you must have heard of this name in your subject called jurisprudence. Now, this doctrine of separation of powers works on this principles of checks and balances. All right. So India, we basically have, our system is based on parallelism of powers. They have three complete different domains. So Congress has a lot of control over the president. President vice versa has a lot of control over the Congress. So Congress, hamari Sonia Gandhi wali Congress nahi, I'm talking about the US Congress. The people who make the laws, the executive will get them executed, and judiciary is a separate ball game altogether. Executive and legislative wings in India, they are, as I have mentioned, they are intertwined because our ministers, you have to, there is a 6-month limit, you have to become a member of either house. So you're a member of one house, then you are a minister as well. So you are a part of the legislative process permanently, and then you are a part of the executive process as well. Yahan pe aisa kuch nahi. So in the US executive, the president is elected for 4 years, and it does not depend, he does not depend whether he or she enjoys the majority numbers in the Congress. Doesn't really matter. हमारे PM के साथ क्या था? You have to enjoy the confidence of the majority in the Lok Sabha, correct? US में ऐसा कुछ भी सीन नहीं. So the executive is completely separated out from the legislative, and they were always in a perpetual war. All right, so this approach actually is much more suited to a developed nation. And have we ever basically considered the presidential form of government? Yes, the Swaran Singh committee did look into it. So it does not depend on the majority numbers in the Congress, and he has no power to dissolve the legislature, that is the US Congress. Now in India, as I've already mentioned, ministers are members of the House and collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. Therefore, executive and legislature are permanently in a wedlock, you can say. Swaran Singh committee, already mentioned. Coalition governments. Now, the disadvantage with the parliamentary form of system is basically the coalition governments. Anytime coalition governments start coming in, no government enjoys a very clear majority. You have instability in the country. Why? Because even foreign players can actually latch on to control of the government, because they can buy out that one player. पीछे से पैसा आ रहा है. The coalition governments can fall apart, and then the costs of elections, policy paralysis, legislature will basically stop enacting laws, will forever be in election mode. It takes a lot of time. So that is a disadvantage of our parliamentary form of system. Should we go towards the presidential form of the government? Well, if we end up doing that, we'll have to create a custom tailor-made solution. We cannot blindly copy America because they're already a developed economy. The advantage is ministers you can appoint as experts. Right now they are limited to political compulsions and elections, whether they are a member of the House, and then how much clout do they have in the party, etc., etc. Then they get ministership. If we ever move towards the presidential system, this will be the one major advantage, that you can appoint ministers who are basically experts as ministers, and then defections का काम थोड़ा सा कम हो जाएगा. Disadvantages, this is basically आपका यहाँ पे, this is time. यहाँ पे आपका जो है presidential के अंदर, if the executive is going in one direction, the legislature is going in one direction, we already are running way behind time, India that is, because it's been policy paralysis, and then you can say we have been in a lot of legislative paralysis as well, and paralysis, I think I've said paralysis. ठीक है जी. So deflections, and this is the disadvantages. आपका time बहुत लग जाएगा. So in the US they can afford to be at loggerheads with each other. We have to take the country forward, because any which way we are a young nation, only like about 70 odd years since independence, and we need to move a bit quickly. But then coalition governments have also cost us 10, 15, 20 years of delays up till now. If and ever we do decide, we will need to make it rather tailor-make to our custom needs. ठीक है जी. And that pretty much should wind up your essay in comparison between India and the US forms of government, and write down the titular basically position of the president in comparison to how powerful the US president is. ठीक है जी. I believe that's one more complete ready-made essay. All the pointers for you. You can just elaborate, connect, put in the pronunciations, the grammar and the punctuations, etc. And I believe that you'll have a very, very solid essay. इसके बाद और अब चलते हैं. I think let us discuss out president and council of ministers. सारा काम हो गया मोटा माटी. And mota mati, for those who are not from the north of India, is basically roughly in lump sum. What I'll do right now is basically take you through the articles from the Bare Act. This is my idea of teaching, from article roughly speaking 52 till about 88. Let us discuss out all relevant articles. That will be basically the icing on the cake for you to write down the pointers. After that, let us move to the Union Judiciary, basically the Supreme Court, and cover out that topic from the point of view of the law optional. Alright, now see you on those lectures. Take care.